Hello there and welcome to World News Programme, streaming to you live on All 24 News. I'm your host, Kirifa Zachary, and up next are the top stories. In just 24 hours, the Zionist entity committed 9 massacres against Palestinians in Gaza, resulting in dozens of martyrs. 2 massacres targeted civilians in the middle of Gaza, while medical personnel, patients and displaced individuals were detained at the Nasser Medical Complex. Coming up as well, the resistance reaffirms its demands and blames the entity for the stalled ceasefire agreement. The Palestinian government urges African nations to halt aggression, siege and settlements, and urges global recognition of the state of Palestine. Also ahead in our news, the African Union backs the call for justice for Palestinians. The G7 voices concern over the threat of displacing civilians in Gaza, and China rejects the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the besieged Gaza Strip. And Algeria supports comprehensive and balanced reform of the UN Security Council and says it's ready to contribute to mobilizing international support for the common African position. Stay tuned for details after the break. Hello again and welcome to the details. First off in our news, in the past 24 hours, the Zionist occupation forces conducted 9 massacres in the Gaza Strip, killing 83 Palestinians and injuring 125 others. According to medical sources, since October 7th, the death toll from the Zionist aggression in Gaza has reached 28,858 martyrs, with 68,677 wounded and tens of thousands missing. And in the latest development, at dawn on Saturday, the Zionist occupation carried out horrific massacres in the central region of the Gaza Strip, resulting in the deaths of dozens of civilians, martyrs. This area has been subjected to continuous campaigns of extermination by the occupation forces. Zahra Farjani narrates the story.
134 days into the relentless Zionist onslaught on Gaza, innocent Palestinians continue to shoulder the horror of occupation forces' aggression. This weekend saw yet another wave of horror unfolds over the central region of the Gaza Strip. The violence left a massive trail of devastation, with dozens of civilians martyred and injured. Among the countless tragedies, the Yunus family, who suffered a devastating blow as their home in Sheikh Ridwan neighborhood north of Gaza City was obliterated by occupation aircraft. More than 10 members of the family were mercilessly butchered in the attack.
Last night, F-16 warplanes targeted the Yunus family, consisting of 20 members. Their 5-story house became rubble. This targeting led to the death of 11 martyrs, and the fate of the rest is not yet known. The neighbors tried to remove the martyrs' bodies of this genocide.
The airstrikes ravaged beyond mercy, striking Gaza City core and penetrating the sanctuaries of Nusayrat Camp, Deir al-Balah and Buraij. The tragic toll right large. Death hung heavy in the air, and the very homes that once cradled the displaced lay shattered, reduced to rubble.
We were sitting in the afternoon and suddenly we heard many missiles falling, so we rushed to check and found that most of the martyrs were children. One of them had the open head. What was his fault?
As if forced displacement from Rafah to central Gaza wasn't enough, the occupiers pursued them, amplifying their suffering. With nowhere left to turn, those who managed to escape the death sentence now grapple with starvation and unyielding siege from air, land and sea. Any promised safe haven by the Zionist war machine is nothing but a cruel mirage in the midst of a genocide.
International concerns and appeals are growing over the plight of besieged patients at Nasser Medical Hospital in Khan Yunis. The Zionist occupation aims to shut down the hospital and convert it into a military barrack. The hospital has faced attacks by tanks, arrest of its staff, and a siege imposed upon it.
للحالات الحرجة التي تحتاج الرعاية الصحية ناهيك عن احتجازها.
The Zionist occupation forces are still detaining a large number of medical personnel, patients and displaced people in the maternity building inside the complex and subjecting them to interrogation in harsh and inhumane conditions. We express our concern about the death of other patients in intensive care and 3 in the children's nursery at any moment as a result of oxygen and electricity cut-off. Nasser Medical Hospital is being destroyed by the Zionist occupation forces, so we appeal to the international organizations to intervene to protect them.
To the resistance now, Hamas blames the Zionist entity for the stalled ceasefire talks. Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political leader, emphasizes the resistance demands as a complete end or to the complete end of the aggression, withdrawal of occupation forces, lifting the Gaza blockade, providing shelter for the displaced, allowing their return, and ending starvation policies, as well as committing to reconstruction.
The resistance will not accept anything less than a complete cessation of aggression, the withdrawal of the occupation army from the Gaza Strip, lifting the oppressive blockade, providing safe and suitable shelter for the displaced and homeless due to the occupation's crimes, especially the return of the displaced to the northern Gaza Strip. It also calls for an end to the brutal policy of starvation, commitment to reconstruction, all of which are humanitarian requirements unanimously supported by the United Nations, human rights institutions, and the International Court of Justice, and the occupation must adhere to them. Achieving a prisoner exchange deal leading to the release of our prisoners, especially the veterans and those with severe sentences, is one of the goals of these negotiations and cannot be overlooked.
And in a different development, the state of Palestine urges Africa to speak out against Zionist aggression, siege, and settlement. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh, representing President Mahmoud Abbas at the African Summit, calls for the international condemnation of the Zionist entity and sanctions for violating international law. He urges the African Union to demand an immediate end to the aggression against Palestinians, especially in Rafah, and to provide humanitarian aid to Gaza.
I now have the pleasure. فرض العقوبات على تلك الدولة.
Imposing sanctions on that state which deliberately violates international law and international humanitarian law, committing the most heinous crimes against the Palestinian people. Let your union's voice be loud and heard as always, and demands an immediate cessation of the killing and aggression carried out by Israel against the Palestinian people in Gaza, especially today in Rafah, as well as in the West Bank and Al-Quds. Let your voice as always be in the fight against the colonial settlement program implemented by Israel in the Palestinian territories. Let your voice be loud and heard as always, in order to facilitate the entry of humanitarian aid into the devastated Gaza Strip.
Prime Minister Shtayyeh also noted the International Court of Justice will hold 56 hearings soon. He emphasized the illegality of the Zionist occupation, citing a UN resolution initiated by Palestine, and mentioned South Africa's lawsuit before the court.
أفريقيا التي وقفت.
Africa, which stood in the name of the free world, the friendly country of South Africa, prosecutes Israel before the International Court of Justice on charges of committing genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. On the 19th of February, the International Court of Justice will also begin hearing of 56 pleadings that the Israel occupation is illegal and illegitimate, based on a resolution issued by the United Nations General Assembly, submitted by Palestine.
The Palestinian Prime Minister welcomed political efforts and initiatives for a political solution, but stressed that the focus shouldn't be on restarting the negotiations, but rather on recognizing the state of Palestine. Let's listen.
اليوم هناك مجموعة مشاريع سياسية.
Today there is a group of political projects being discussed. There is a political project that the Arabs are working on, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we are with them. There are ideas put forward by Spain and adopted by the European Union, which call for an international peace conference that results in recognition of the state of Palestine. There are general ideas presented by Britain at a time when there is no partner in Israel. There are American efforts whose futures are crystallizing, but they talk about two-state solution and recognition of the state of Palestine. We welcome these efforts, but we want to move from statements, plans, and ideas to actions.
And in similar development, during the opening of the 37th African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Chairman Moussa Faki reaffirmed Africa's strong solidarity with the Palestinian people in their pursuit of justice. He stressed the need for Palestinians to achieve full freedom and sovereignty over their independent state. Moussa Faki condemned the ongoing genocide in Gaza as unprecedented in human history. He also stated Africa's condemnation of Zionist aggression and support for implementing International Court of Justice decisions, seen as victories for all supporters of the Palestinian cause.
Jamais, depuis la création de l'Union africaine,
Absurd attempts to settle our differences by brutal and futile force prevail publicity before everyone's eyes. The most flagrant case is that of Gaza in Palestine, literally razed to the ground, tens of thousands of its inhabitants almost exterminated, their dignity humiliated, and all their rights stripped away.
spoliés de tous ses droits.
And during an African Union conference sideline meeting, Tunisian Prime Minister Ahmed al-Hashani reaffirmed unconditional support for Palestinian rights. He stressed Tunisia's backing for an independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital and expressed concern over ongoing Zionist aggression. Al-Hashani stated Tunisia's intensified diplomatic efforts for immediate international intervention. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh thanked Tunisia for its unwavering support. The G7 foreign ministers meeting in Munich expressed concern about the potential forced displacement of Palestinian civilians from Gaza and the consequences of Zionist military operations in Rafah. Italy, currently holding the G7 presidency, issued a statement on behalf of Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States, highlighting these worries.
G7 foreign ministers called for urgent action to address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza, particularly the plight of 1.5 million civilians sheltering in Rafah, and they expressed deep concern for the potentially devastating consequences of the civilian population of Israel's further full-scale military operation in that area.
Still with international reactions, Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani stated at the Munich Security Conference that recent negotiations for a Gaza ceasefire between the Zionist entity and Hamas haven't been promising. He emphasized that a ceasefire shouldn't be conditioned on hostage release agreements.
The pattern in the last few days are not really very promising, but as I always repeat, we will always remain optimistic, we will always remain pushing. Now, this is the dilemma that we've been in, and unfortunately this has been misused by a lot of countries that in order to get a ceasefire, it's conditional to have the hostage deal. It shouldn't be conditional. What's conditional is the humanitarian catastrophe over there in Gaza.
For his part, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, speaking at the Munich Security Conference, pledged that China will not allow the humanitarian crisis in Gaza to continue. He stressed the need for a permanent solution, advocating for an independent Palestinian state. Wang Yi also highlighted the ongoing displacement of Palestinians who are unable to return to their homes.
A solution to the Red Sea crisis needs to address the root cause. The root cause is the ongoing conflict in Gaza. China's position is clear. First, an immediate ceasefire and an end to the fighting, and the fighting must not continue. Second, we need to open up access to humanitarian aid. Third, we should convene an international peace conference as soon as possible to achieve the two-state solution. We cannot allow this humanitarian catastrophe to continue.
Moving on to international public opinion now. Thousands marched in London and Madrid in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, demanding an end to the aggression. Moroccans also demonstrated and protested the normalization with the Zionist entity and invasions of Rafah, denouncing attacks on civilians and infrastructure in Gaza. Here's Salman Asib reporting.
Millions worldwide have taken to the streets in solidarity with Gaza, from the United Kingdom to Spain, even region-occupied Palestine in the West Bank, crowds raised their voices in defiance of the ongoing Zionist genocide in Gaza, demanding urgent international intervention for an immediate ceasefire. Here in the city of London, scuffles sporadically broke out between demonstrators and police officers as pro-Palestinian protesters marched with flags and banners to support Palestinians in Gaza.
We should all be against genocide, that's number one. Number two, when murder of this scale happens, especially of children, we should all be extremely concerned. Could you kill a child? And yet there are so many enabling others to kill children. And it's a complete shock. I thought that Srebrenica was the last time, but no, we're seeing it happen live. We are watching it happen all the time.
Still in Europe, thousands rallied against the Munich Security Conference, with pro-Palestinian activists joining the chorus condemning the genocidal war in Gaza.
Immediate ceasefire. First, leave the status quo as it is and then negotiate at eye level on an equal footing. We can't just bash each other's heads in like in the Middle Ages or the Stone Age. There is so much suffering all over the world.
Across central Madrid, crowds of protesters echoed the call for an urgent ceasefire in Gaza.
Que no calle el mundo. Que no calle.
The world must not be silent because Zionism is a personalization of terror, and this will go on and on. Palestine is not the target. It is a mean to reach more and more places. This is only the beginning of a worldwide massacre. Free Palestine, always. In Morocco, the authority for supporting the nation's issues led 120 protesters in major cities like Casablanca and Salah. Demonstrators expressed strong support for Palestine and a loud and clear message: stop the assault on Rafah, end the genocide, and halt normalization with the entity. Despite global outcry from both people and world leaders, the Zionist occupation persists its aggressive actions against innocent civilians. It continues to wreak havoc on infrastructure, making Gaza uninhabitable and forcing displacement in defiance of international laws and humanitarian conventions.
To other important development now, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune affirmed Algeria's resolve to advance and prosper in line with its historical legacy. In his National Martyrs' Day message, the president noted Algeria's progress in construction despite challenges, highlighting economic and social achievements. Abdelmadjid Tebboune underscored the emergence of a new Algeria, emphasizing its increasing global influence and recognized voice on the international stage.
In our collective journey of building Algeria rooted in the sacrifices and trust of the proud Algerian people, we acknowledge the progress made despite challenges. The commitment of Algerians has propelled us forward in achieving economic stability, marked by overcoming red indicators. Social advancements, preserving the dignity of our people, underscore our dedication. As we firmly step into the future, Algeria is resolute in upholding its historical legacy and national pride, striving for exaltation and glory. The nation's influence and credibility have resonated globally, fostering strategic partnerships in a complex world. Today, we salute a new Algeria, forged from the sacrifice of our martyrs, propelling us towards lofty national goals.
And in other news, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf, representing President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, is attending the 37th session of the African Union in Addis Ababa. The session focuses on education in Africa and also addresses the Palestinian issue, African security, and institutional reform. Algeria advocates for comprehensive reform of the UN Security Council and emphasizes 3 priorities for collective efforts in the future. During the meeting held on the sidelines of the 37th African Union session, attended by Minister Attaf representing Abdelmajid Tebboune, or President Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria expressed its readiness to genuinely contribute to mobilizing international support for the African position. Algeria aims to make tangible progress in reforming the UN Security Council through collective efforts.
تجدد الجزائر تأييدها لمخرجات قمة أويالا.
Algeria renews its support for the outcomes of the Oyala summit, affirming its readiness to contribute faithfully and sincerely to this collective effort aimed at mobilizing more international support for the common African position. It also commits to working in full coordination with its brothers to make tangible progress within the framework of the negotiation process under the auspices of our United Nations organization. In this regard, Algeria looks forward to jointly organizing with the sister Republic of Sierra Leone a high-level ministerial meeting between the Group of 10 and the 5 permanent members of the Security Council on the sidelines of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Additionally, Algeria anticipates hosting the 12th ministerial meeting of the Committee of 10, scheduled for next June in Algiers, as a renewed opportunity to evaluate the negotiating process and adjust our strategy in accordance with the developments that may arise in the context of the renewed international interest in the issue of Security Council reform.
تتمثل الأولوية الأولى في ضرورة التصدي لمختلف المحاولات.
The first priority lies in the need to confront various attempts aimed at undermining the reform process or weakening and dispersing positions, particularly the common African position that stands out with its goals and objectives and its original and rooted character in correcting historical injustices. The second priority materializes in calling for the establishment of a comprehensive, balanced and integrated reform project that goes beyond the scope of expanding membership to include all substantive issues related to the Council's working methods and its approaches to various agenda items. As for the third and final priority, it emphasizes the necessity to adhere to mandate approved by the United Nations General Assembly and to guide the governmental negotiations conducted under its auspices as a unifying and consensus framework for addressing the Security Council reform file. It rejects any attempt to diminish the value of this framework or sideline it in favor of individual or isolated initiatives that cannot achieve consensus among member states.
Representing President Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf participated in the African Union Summit's Committee on Climate Change in Addis Ababa. The meeting aimed to coordinate African efforts in international climate negotiations, ensuring approaches aligned with African countries' needs and development requirements. Let's get more stories making headlines around the globe with Islam Said.
Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for the missile attack on the Panamanian-flagged oil tanker Polax, bound for India, which the U.S. officials said the previous day had been hit by a missile. In Dakar, Senegal, hundreds marched for the prompt rescheduling of the presidential election after President Macky Sall's commitment to abide by a court order overturning the postponement. The African Union, for its part, expressed concern about Senegal, welcomed the government's response to the Constitutional Court's decision, and wished success for prompt and transparent elections. UN envoy to Libya Abdoulaye Bathily warns of a serious threat to Libya's unity and urges swift formation of a unified government to address institutional fragility and internal divisions for the stability of the nation. Supporters of former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's party rallied in Islamabad on Saturday to protest against the alleged manipulation of the country's national election results. Khan and his party say that the election results were rigged against their candidates, who should have won even more seats. Thousands of people rallied in Croatia's capital on Saturday, accusing the ruling center-right party of corruption and demanding that this year's parliamentary election be held as soon as possible. The gathering in Zagreb was organized by 11 center and left-leaning opposition parties, with political tensions in the European Union member nation rising. In Bolivia, La Paz residents struggle with heavy rains causing collapsed houses, swollen rivers, and landslides, prompting an orange warning until Wednesday. The intense rain this week hit a 20-year record in La Paz with 85 millimeters reported, according to local media.
And with this, our program comes to an end. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. And until next time, take care.